So thank you very much for participating. And I think it's now due time that we welcome Chris and deliver his presentation, which is a bit of a state of the art of your thinking about food system transformation, Chris. So please come to the floor, and we are very curious what you would like to share with us, the moment in time, considering the urgency and the insecurity in which we are now considering food system transformation.
Thank you, Bart. So let me just apologize for maybe the background. I'm currently in Oxford. There's a scientific conference on food system science in Europe. So I've been invited. So I'm actually sneaking out the conference to give this course. So let me share my screen and just maybe make sure that everybody muting themselves, because it's a bit disturbing when people are over speaking. All right. I'm going to also move these things away. Yes, and I got my little pointer. So thanks again, Bart and Miriam, for those little introduction. I was smiling when I saw the little test you did, because I was like, well, I don't actually have to give that lectures. People have already made their mind. But no, of course, I'm going to share what I've been working on for a couple of years now. So let me make sure I can, yes. So what I want to talk about today, well, I want to talk about the political economy, but not political economy of food system. That has been done for a couple of decades now by a very brilliant scholar. I want to talk about the political economy of the transformation of food system. And that's something which is a bit different, and that has not been necessarily well studied so far. And as part of that discussion, I want to touch on three main points. The first is, I want to talk about actually the third of the question we had, which is what are the main barriers to, but again, not just to transformation, but to transformation toward sustainable outcomes. Because as we all know, food systems are always transforming. So there may be barriers, but systems are moving. The question is why they're not moving in the right direction. So what are the main barriers to the sustainable transformation is much more relevant from a policy perspective. The second is I want to then focus, narrow down my discussion on the political economy barriers. So we're going to see that there's many different types of barriers that, and you could see in the cloud of the words that there was several nature of barrier, but it was interesting to see that there was also a cluster around politics, around mindset, around bureaucracy, and around governance. That's exactly what I want to focus on now. And then as part of that, I want to spend a little bit time on the second question, which was about the role of technology. And I'm going to argue that contrary to what a lot of people would like us to believe, technological innovation or the food transformation is not just about the role of technological innovation. It's in fact more than that, and it's about exactly governance and political economy. So let me try to dive directly into this. I should say that obviously this presentation will be slightly provocative and certainly oversimplistic, because in 20 minutes, I cannot take you through the nuances of those. So don't take for granted everything here, take everything with a grain of salt, but just let it settle down. And even if you are a bit shocked by some of the statements, maybe that could help the discussion that will follow hopefully after the two presentations of today. So what is, first of all, political economy in the context of food system transformation, and why does it matter for us? Well, what is political economy? I'm going to use the definition of one of my colleague, Bruce Evans, that have worked on those recently, and I like the definition he gives. So for him, political economy is basically about the interaction between the political and the economic world that include how institution, policy, and power dynamic shape the food system and influence the way those food systems are moving. And the reason I like that definition is because, of course, he highlights one, sort of the usual suspect when we talk about political economy. Most of the people imagine that's an issue of power, and they are correct. So there's definitely some issues of, asymmetry of power. But I think what I like in that definition is also pointing out the fact that it's not just about the power of few actors. It's also about the role and the behavior of institutions and policies. And that's going to be what I'm going to talk about today. And why does it import? Why is it important for food system transformation? Well, because if we want to transform system, you first need to destabilize the current status quo and the current actors that have a strong interest to keep that status quo. But those actors, they are not the only one that could be the barrier to change. And I'm going to show that institutions and policies are also part of the problem. So let's start first by looking at the different type of barrier that may prevent food system from transforming toward more sustainable outcomes. And here I'm using again Evans' framework, who tried to cluster those different barriers into 5 major groups. The first of which, and I'm not going to present in detail those 5 barriers. If you want, you can actually go back to the papers and his detailing is giving more information about those. But the first one is the biological barrier that include obviously the effect of climate change, but also the result of the depletion of resources. The second big group of barrier is those socio-economic barriers that include the massive change in the world population as we observe, the type of economic system that we are having, in particular globalization, and poverty and inequity. All of those can create barriers that prevent world to change in the right direction. The next group of barriers that he has identified is the socio-technological barrier, including the inadequate technology and infrastructure, but also interesting, maybe the role of research and innovation that don't always take us to in the right direction. The fourth type of barrier that he proposed is the more individual one, the socio-cultural barrier, one of which is the one that we know very well. It's almost in our genes, it's definitely in our culture. We don't like change. Nobody likes change. So that's often a major barrier at individual level or at institutional level. And almost paradoxically, propensity to change can also be a barrier to sustainability. When the change we want are not sustainable. Think of, for instance, the increasing consumption of ultra-processed food. This is something we want, something we crave for, more meat, more of those ultra-processed food. This is, in fact, a barrier to sustainability. So a change can become a barrier. And then lack of awareness and knowledge is part also of those problems. And then the big bag, as you can see here, is those political economy barriers. And here, Evans has identified 2 main clusters. One is what we discussed already, or we touched upon in the question, which was the role of those powerful actors, which by their influence try to slow down the change and maintain the status quo. But he also identified another type of major political barrier, which is the lack or the deficiencies of those institutions and policies, their fragmentation, their ineffectiveness. So what I want to do now is actually touch on 3 points. And those relate to actually those political economy barriers. The first is, as we just started to discuss, the fact that food system is a very particular system. It's a system which is highly controlled by very powerful actors, the people that we call the big food or the big ag, which have very strong political and economic and financial interests to maintain the current strategy as the current trajectory. The second point I'm going to make is that in addition to those powerful actors, we have other actors such as government or consumers. But unfortunately, those other actors are characterized by very strong divergence or inconsistency in their own objective, which prevent them to be or become strong enough, influence enough to counterbalance the influence of the big actors. And then the third point I'm going to do is that although technological innovation was part of the socio-technological barrier if they are wrong innovation, I'm arguing that by having technological innovation institutionalized as the solution for the problem, it becomes not just a socio-technological barrier, but it becomes a political and institutional barrier. So I'm going to obviously elaborate on those 3 points so that you better understand more concretely what I mean here. Let's start with the first of those. The fact that food system is controlled and locked by powerful actors. So these figures that was put by some of my colleagues from Wageningen show that from the very top part, the very upstream part of the food system, including production of seed, production of agrochemical, all the way to the food vendors and the retail industry, the whole food system is in fact controlled by a very little numbers of big transnational corporations. So you can see, for instance, that for agrochemical, the top 4 biggest corporations control 70% of the market. In Germany, the top 4 supermarkets control 85% of the whole food retail sector. So you have a very, very concentrated factors. Now, what are the implications of that very strong, very impulsive concentration of power? Well, those actors are there using their resources to influence policies and debate. So they do it different ways. They can do it through what we know very well, the lobbying activities, or what we also call the power of influence. But they can do it indirectly, sometimes without us noticing it. One of the ways is through what we call the scale effect. Some of those actors, some of those transnational corporations are so big that when they make a decision, an internal decision, that decision does not affect just their own enterprise, their own corporation, but the whole market, sometimes a whole continent. So that's another way for them to actually influence the system. Another way to influence the system is through research and development, the R&D. In theory, in the academic world, the R&D, research and development, is often presented as a solution, enablers to change. While in fact, pragmatically, empirical evidence show that R&D is not systematically associated with change. In fact, there was some a couple of decades ago now, some research by the U.S. The U.S. Federal Trade Commission that show that the stronger the concentration in a part of the market, the fewer the change. So there was a negative correlation between the level of market concentration and the level of innovation. And that is related to what we call the concept of defensive research and development, which refer to the situation where those corporations use their resources, their knowledge, their money, not to put new product on the market, but to protect their existing one. So they protect their own investment and try to deter the entry of newcomers. So that's what we call the concept of defensive research and development, which explains partially why you have so much difficulty to make the system change. Now, let me actually, those were rhetorics, blah, blah, blah. Now, let me give you some actually concrete evidence. Did you know that the combined spending by all those big ag and big food transnational corporations lobbying in Washington is bigger than the lobby expenditure that the entire US defense industry? So all those big guys spend even more money than the ones that are selling guns. More specifically, between 2013 and 2015, the whole American Food Corporation spent almost 200 million to try to slow down or to block the different legislation that the federal government was trying to push to force those different food industry to actually start labeling what basically what they're selling. So there was a big threat for them, and they spent almost 200 millions within 3 years to try to block those legislation. Another type of evidence. So in 2019, under the pressure of the government representative of Brazil and Argentina, the IPCC report on climate change on land see all the reference of the contribution of plant-based diet to green gas emission reduction removed. A bit closer to us, during the preparation of the UNFSS, the coalition of the meat industry made clear that they will not tolerate any deviation for their official position. In particular, they will not support any statement that suggests that the livestock industry is not already sustainable. So what we end up with is, while all the other sectors during the preparation of the UNFSS end up with one position paper, the sustainable livestock cluster end up with 3 position papers. One by the expert and 2 by the industry, who didn't want anything but what their position was to be told. Even more closer to us, during the COP28 in Dubai, so everybody was, congratulating each other because so many countries signed the Declaration on the Sustainable Agriculture, Resilience Food System, and Climate Action. But have you ever taken actually the time to read that declaration? Well, if you do, you're going to see that the term livestock, red meat, or protein is never mentioned. And that reflects the request by the industry to see the impact of the livestock sector on the environment, on its contribution to green gas emission, completely eliminated from the declaration.
Chris, sorry if I interrupt you, but we need to speed up a bit.
I don't think so. I am in time for my 20 minutes.
Okay.
And I cannot speed up unless you want me to stop now. So the second point I want to talk about is those kind of inconsistency and conflict of interest for the other actors. And I'm going to use the case of the red meat here again. You probably recognize these figures, which is derived from the Eat Lancet report. And he basically tells us that at the present time, if we want to stay within the boundaries of the planet, we would, at the global level, need to reduce by 50% the consumption and the production of red meat. Those are the facts. Now, what do we see? Well, in fact, in terms of production, the production is projected, the world production of red meat is projected to expand by another 19 million tons by 2029 to reach almost 345 million tons. On the consumption side, well, we know that in most of the countries, we are currently exceeding the reference diet by between 300 and 600%, even more 3 billion people, half of the population, is actually expected to increase their consumption of meat, not to reduce it. Now, what does the country or the government do? So I'm going to use the three top government in terms of, or the government of the top 3 countries in terms of production of red meat. In the US, the industry Tyson and Smithfield, which are 2 of the biggest actors in the beef industry, received 570 million per year of subsidies from the federal government between 1997 and 2005. In China, the pork industry received 20 billion per year, $20 US, which represents about $47 per pig. And in Brazil, the federal government is actually a shareholder of JBS, which is the world's largest meat processor. So, in fact, what those few slides show is that while we knew the private sector is part of the problem, in reality, consumers, by their demand, and government, by their policy and subsidies, have also their share of responsibility in creating or in maintaining the problem. Let's move on the third point, the role of technological innovation in the current discussion. So what I'm saying is that, also, as I said, there is currently an emerging discourse narrative which presents technological as the solution to fix our food system. For instance, the UNFSS, we have, you may recognize the name at the top here. Those are the chair and co-chair of the scientific committee of the UNFSS. So they wrote a book, and in that book, it's very clear that innovation for those people are the game changers that will help us fix our food system. Of course, they're not the only one. The World Economic Forum, which was another big actor, or is another big actor in the current debate on food system, also they talk about technological innovation as being an accelerator of the food system transformation. Of course, the private sector themselves. So we have, for instance, one of the big ag actors here that help or pretend to help transforming the food system through innovation in agriculture. What perhaps is more surprising is that scientists themselves are kind of slowly starting to contribute to that narrative. And you can see, for instance, the illustration here by the number of times the term digital agri-food is now being used, and you have the number of publications and the number of citations that has exploded since 2018. So because scientists love buzzword, right? I'm arguing that this narrative is dangerous because it gives a false sense of easy and quick fix. Why am I saying this? Well, look for 1 second. Look around you. The current unsustainability of our food system is in fact the result of past technology. And why is it so? Why is it that, why is the system which is driven by innovation not sustainable? Because innovation is not driven by sustainability principle. Innovation is driven by profit. So in sum, I'm arguing that innovation does not necessarily all the time lead to sustainability, yet, as you can see, it's been officialized, institutionalized as the way to go for food system transformation. So let me finish here. I'm saying the world's food system is not ready and not willing to change. Despite the goodwill of a few, most people are still not ready to change, or certainly not at the scale that would be required for real transformation. For that transformation to happen, we will have to change what drives the system. While we all agree that in theory, innovation on all sorts of innovation can be agent of change. For those change to lead to sustainability, we will have to secure that profit, which is what drives innovation, is better aligned with sustainability. At the present, this is not the case. Additionally, as we saw, a lot of actors have strong interest to blurry the debate or to slow down the changes. So until we recognize and tackle those dynamics, it's very unlikely that the food system as we know it change in the direction that we know is necessary to become really sustainable. Thank you for your attention.
And thank you, Chris, for this very provocative, but also very interesting presentation. I think we could spend the whole afternoon now questioning you and going into debate with you, because we could agree or disagree with some of your statements, but that would be quite enlightening, because it helps us to explore the critical questions that we ask ourselves every day when we think about food system transformation. And I think you put really the key issues on the table, and that doesn't happen every day. So thank you very much for that. And I think that we also need to listen carefully to Debussy, because there are more opinions and points of view on the same question that we would like to discuss today.